So Lian have just updated the O11 Dynamic Mini. This is the new improved V2 version, and in this video I'm going to be pointing out all its features, and I'm also going to be showing you step by step how to put a build together in it. If you see any parts you like, you find links to everything that I've used in the description, so let's make a start by taking a detailed look at the case. So to remove our tempered glass side panel, there's a captive thumb screw at the back which we need to loosen, and then we're able to pop the panel out and lift up and away. And our front tempered glass panel can simply be popped out from the top and then lifted up and away. Taking a look at our other side panel, we've got this large perforated area to act as a source of airflow for our power supply's intake fan, and it actually protrudes out from the side of the case, and this is one of the modifications AMD have made to allow the case now to accommodate full-sized ATX power supplies. So there's nothing holding this panel on, it can simply be popped out from the top and then lifted up and away. And taking a look at the back of the panel, we've got this non-removable mesh which will act as a dust filter. To remove our case's top panel, we've got two captive thumb screws at the back we need to loosen, then we're able to pull the panel backwards, lift up and away. And again, taking a look at the back of our top panel, we've got this integrated piece of mesh to act as a dust filter. We've got another panel at the back which you're not going to need to remove unless you want to move your case's I/O to the top of the case. There's a little blanking plate that you're going to need to remove, and I'll show you how to do this later on. So again, there's one captive thumb screw at the back to loosen, and then we can pull this panel backwards and lift up and away. So on the top of the case, we've got a removable fan stroke radiator bracket, and on this bracket you're going to be able to mount up to 3 120 or 2 140mm fans, or up to a 360 or 280mm radiator. The bracket is held on with 5 screws. There's one at the top and 2 at the front and 2 at the back, which you need to remove. And once all the screws have been removed, you can simply lift the bracket straight up to remove it. On the bottom of the case, it's up to 3 120mm fans, and again we've got another removable fan bracket. You'll see this bracket's on a slight angle, so if I set a fan into place, it'll let you see this. And this is going to do two things. Firstly, it's going to improve the cooling, particularly to your GPU. And the second thing, you've got nice fancy fans like I've got here with reverse blades and screens on them, it's going to give you a better look at them. The bracket's held on with 2 screws at the side, and then when the screws removed, the bracket can simply be tilted up and lifted away. You'll notice at the bottom of the case we've got a full-length dust filter, and it can simply be pulled out from the back of the case for cleaning. On the side of the case is up to 2 120mm fans or up to a 240mm radiator. This bracket isn't removable, but to improve aesthetics and airflow, we've got these 2 little cover plates, and the idea is you put your fans or radiator in the middle, and these will help hide the spaces at the side. And the reason these are here, it gives you flexibility about where you want to put your fans or radiator on the side of the case. So to remove the little brackets, they simply clip off and slide out. And then this shows you the full length that you have for mounting your fans or radiator. So out of the box, you've got one cover plate at the top and the bottom, and that centers your 2 fans in the middle. But if you prefer, you can have the 2 cover plates at the bottom, having your fans and radiator more towards the top of the case. Or for example, if you're wanting to go with a thick radiator at the top of the case, you may want to have your fans more towards the bottom of the case, and you can have these 2 cover plates at the top. In terms of motherboard support, the case supports motherboards up to ATX in size, and if you want to go with a CPU cooler, the maximum height supported is up to 160mm. It's good to see we've got additional cutouts for back connector ATX motherboards. Although the case supports micro ATX motherboards, there's no additional cutouts for back connector micro ATX motherboards. If you're going with an ATX motherboard, there's just one height position to install it in, but if you go with a micro ATX motherboard, you've got 2 different height positions to install it in. Out of the box, the standoffs are in the default high position, but it is possible to move them down and install your micro ATX motherboard further down. So if you do want to move a micro ATX or mini ATX motherboard down to the lower position, the first thing to do is to move these 4 screws down to the lower position, and you'll notice there's an additional hole down beneath each of the standoffs. So in the case accessory box, you get the standoff insertion and removal tool. It simply pops over the standoff, and then you can loosen it and then move it down to the lower position and tighten it up. You'll notice we've got this little bracket here with a cutout for our 24-pin cable, and it has our 2 rightmost standoffs attached to it. So if we're going to go to the lower position, we need to move this whole bracket down to the lower position. It's held on with 2 screws, and then we can replace the screws in the lower position. There's normally 2 additional standoffs at the bottom of your micro ATX motherboard that you're going to need to add in. Either way, whether you're installing it in the top or the bottom position. So just line your motherboard up and check the right holes. You'll find the standoffs in the case accessory box, and you may also want to remove the 3 ATX standoffs at the bottom of the case for a cleaner look. So because we've now moved our standoffs down, our motherboard's not going to line up with this cutout, so we need to move this little cover plate to the top. We can just grab the little clips at each end to free it up, move it up to the top, and then simply push into place. And our motherboard will then line up in the lower position. So as I've mentioned, the only option for an ATX motherboard is to install it with the standoffs at the top in their default position, but you can move a micro ATX and mini ATX motherboard down. Main reason for doing it is it improves radiator compatibility at the top of the case. And having a micro ATX motherboard installed in the lowest position is the only position you can install a 280mm radiator at the top. And in this position, you've got up to 63mm of thickness for your fans and radiator. So again, important to mention, if you're going with an ATX motherboard, you can't install a 280mm radiator at the top. So even if you aren't planning on installing a 360mm radiator at the top, moving your micro ATX motherboard down to the lower position is going to improve the compatibility you have at the top for your fans and radiator by 20mm, up to 92mm in height compared to 72mm with the motherboard installed in the top position. So I'm planning on installing an ATX motherboard, so I'm going to put all the standoffs back to their default position. So you can see at the rear of the case, we've got 5 horizontal expansion slot brackets, and in terms of graphics card support, it's absolutely massive, up to a maximum length of 400mm. So Lian Li are keen to make sure your graphics card is well supported, and they include this GPU support bracket. To change the height, there's a little thumb screw at the side you can loosen, and the bracket's going to slide up and down. And you can also change the position of this bracket. 2 thumb screws at the side, loosen them, and then you're going to be able to slide the bracket side to side. And there is additional screw holes here, so you are able to move some of these screws, and that's going to give you further options for sliding that bracket. So you can move it all the way over to this way here and replace the screw over here. So really nice flexibility with the GPU support bracket. Now I'm planning on installing my graphics card in the vertical position, so there's an additional bracket that I'm going to use, so I'm going to unscrew this one and remove it from the case. So another really cool feature this case has is it has this large rubber grommet between the 2 compartments in the case. So this is going to be really handy for passing your GPU power cables through. Normally this can be a real pain trying to get them fitted onto the motherboard, but you can simply bring them outside the case, bring them through, and then pull the cables back into the case. So really smart. So what if you want to install your graphics card in the vertical position? Well, in the case accessory box, you do get this vertical bracket. The first thing to do is remove the standard bracket. It's held on with 4 screws. And then we can remove the bracket. Just going to remove this little bracket to make the installation easier. And then I'm going to set the vertical bracket into place. You can see we have holes here and little notches protruding, so just a matter of lining these up and pushing them into place. And then we can secure it with the same 4 screws. And then we can replace the motherboard cover plate. So you can see at the rear of the case, we've now got 4 vertical slots, but what Lian Li say is not to be using this one closest to the motherboard because it can interfere with fans installed below the GPU. You can see our bracket's tilted down, so the fans towards this end are going to be further away from the bracket than they are at this end. And also our riser cable is going to plug in at this end. So because I've got a triple slot card, I've removed one of these slot covers from the horizontal bracket, and I'm just going to install it in this position. The other thing that I'm noting is that once you've installed a rear fan, you're not going to have access to these screw holes. So you are going to want to install your graphics card before installing your rear fan. And depending on the height of your screwdriver, your top AIO may also get in the way of screwing things in. So the only thing that you're not going to get with a case that you're going to need to install your graphics card vertically is a riser cable, and you're going to have to pick this up at additional cost. So if you do want to go with your graphics card vertically, Lian Li are still keen to make sure it's well supported with this vertical GPU support bracket. To use it, you are going to have fans installed at the bottom, and then you're simply going to use standard fan screws for them to screw it into the bottom fans. So again, with this little bracket, you get loads of adjustment options. So to get it into the right position, it's just simply a matter of lifting it up and then sliding it to where you want it and lowering it down, and it's just simply going to lock into place. And in terms of increasing the height to where it supports your graphics card, simply going to turn this thumb screw and you'll notice that the height of the bracket comes up. So a really nice addition that Lian Li have included. Moving to the other side of the case, in the middle we've got this cable cover bracket. It's held on with a screw at the top, and then once the screw's been removed, the bracket can be tilted out and lifted up and away. You're going to be able to mount 2 2.5-inch drives to the back of this bracket. For 2.5-inch drives, it's these smaller screws that you're going to want to use. So you're simply going to use 4 of these screws to secure 4 rubber pads to the SSD. And then you're going to be able to take your drive, slot it through the holes at the top, push it into place, and then push down. And then you can see from the other side, the little screws are going to lock into place at the bottom. And then you've got your cutout for your drive I/O. There's also 2 hard drive cages at the bottom. They're secured in place with rubber pads and screws, but are locked in place with 2 thumb screws on each side. So your first thing you're going to have to do is remove the thumb screws. Then with the thumb screws removed, you can simply lift the drive up, bring the screws up to line with the holes in the case, and then you're going to be able to remove the drive from the case. First thing to do is open the drive cage. So you're going to have to pull this little bit of metal to the top, slide it to the front, and that's going to allow you to tilt the drive tray up and open it up. So if you want to go with a 2.5-inch drive, these are the screw holes that you're going to use. So set your drive into place, and you're going to use 4 of the motherboard screws with a little lip around the outside to secure the drive to the cage. If you want to go with a 3.5-inch drive, set your drive into the cage, and then you can install it into place using the thicker 3.5-inch drive screws. So another important thing to mention, if you are using a motherboard with back connectors, these are going to stick out towards the back of the motherboard, and you're going to be plugging your cables in here from the back. So this means that you're only going to be able to install one of the hard drive cages in the outer position. And obviously you're going to leave the cages out, get all your cables plugged in, and then install the outer position hard drive cage just at the end. And you can see with the hard drive cage just installed in the outer position, there's plenty of room behind it for your connectors and cables. So even if you're not planning on installing any 2.5-inch or 3.5-inch drives, you might want to leave these drive cages in place. Lian and Lee have discovered that a lot of people will stuff their spare cables into the drive cages, and they've made it easier for you with this latching mechanism. So we can pull the cage open, you're able to stuff all your cables into place, and then when you push this back in, it's going to lock into place at the front holding the cables. As you'd expect, coming from Lian Li cable management, looks like it should be really straightforward. We've got plenty of Velcro cable straps here, down at the bottom, and also up at the top to help manage all your cables. And we've got another really cool feature here for cable management. This is a little leveler to help keep your 24-pin cable level. So there's a thumb screw on this side, you can loosen it, and you're going to be able to slide this up and down into place. So you're going to install your 24-pin cable, and you're then going to push this up to where your cable is completely level, and then tighten up the thumb screw, and that's going to really improve aesthetics at the front. So as I mentioned, the case is now compatible with full-sized ATX power supplies, and Lian Li have done this by using this bracket here. It allows the power supply to be installed slightly further outside the case than this side, and that's what the little dent in the panel is for. So in terms of power supply support, if you want to install this cable cover bracket, the maximum length supported is up to 70.5 millimeters. Whereas if you're happy to remove the cable cover bracket, the maximum length supported is up to 200 millimeters. So to remove the offset bracket, you're going to need to remove these 2 screws at the top, and then you're going to be able to remove the bracket from the case. So you're going to install your power supply to this bracket outside the case and then set the whole thing into place. So in terms of our front I/O, we've got a power button, a single USB Type-C, 2 USB Type-A ports, and a combined headphone and microphone jack. As I've mentioned, it is possible to move our I/O to the top of the case, and I'll show you how to do that. First thing to do is to free up all our I/O cables, and we're going to want to pull them through to the bottom of the case. We've got 4 screws holding our I/O module to the case. There's 2 in the main compartment and 2 in the second compartment. And then the I/O module at the front should be free, and we can simply pull it out from the front. So it's going to be installed in this panel at the top, but we're going to need this little cover plate to cover the hole in the bottom of the case. So you can see it's held on with 2 screws, and then with the screws removed, the cover plate is free to be removed from the top panel. We can replace the little cover plate at the front of the case, and because it's shorter than our I/O module, we're only going to need to secure it with 2 screws, so 1 in the main compartment and 1 in the second compartment. Before we reinstall our I/O module, we want to change where the cables come out. Rather than coming out here, we're going to want to have them coming out here. So the first thing we're going to need to do is remove the cover with the 2 screws, and then it's just going to be a matter of routing all the cables from here to here. Okay, so that's all the cables moved over. We'll replace the panel. Next, I'm just going to reinstall our top panel, and we'll tighten it up with the thumb screw at the back. And to remove the cover plate, you don't actually need to remove this panel. I just did it to give you a better view. You've got little screw holes here, and these were the two screws that we loosened, which would have allowed us to remove the cover plate. Next, I'm just going to pass all our I/O cables through the cutout at the top, and then we'll lower our I/O module down into place. And then we'll just secure it into place with two screws. And I'm sure you're wondering about why we needed to remove the cables to this side. Well, the reason is originally they were hanging out here, where they would have been blocking the fans here. The idea of having the cables over this end is we've got cable tie down points here, so we're able to use cable ties to manage all our cables here, so they're not going to be in the way of our side mounted fans. So that's what it looks like with the I/O module installed at the top. We're now ready to start working on our motherboard, and we're going to be installing our CPU, our M.2 SSD and our RAM before we install the motherboard into the case. To open our socket cover, we're going to push this lever down and out, bring it all the way to the middle of the motherboard, and then we can go ahead and open the socket cover up. Holding our CPU carefully by the edges and making sure we've got the text the correct way up, we're going to lower it carefully down into the socket. Once we're happy it's sitting correctly, we're going to go ahead and close the socket cover down. And then as we close this lever, the black bit of plastic will pop off, and I'll put it into our motherboard box for safekeeping. To remove our M.2 SSD heatsink, we're going to push this lever up, then we can simply tilt the heatsink out and lift away. Then we can install our M.2 SSD into the top socket. We're going to flatten it down and it's going to clip into place. And we're just going to want to remove the plastic protection from the heatsink, and then we just need to replace the heatsink. We're going to be installing our RAM in the second and fourth slot along from the CPU, so we'll go ahead and open the clips on these slots. And then we can go ahead and line the RAM up with the slot. And once we're happy everything's lined up, it's just some firm pressure to the top and it's going to clip into place. And then it's the same thing with our second stick. Next, we can set the motherboard into the case, line it up with the standoffs at the back. And you'll notice that once the middle standoff goes through the middle hole in the motherboard, it's going to help hold the motherboard in place. We'll then secure the motherboard to the case using none of the screws with a little lip around the outside. Next, we've got our case cables to plug in. Our HD audio cable is going to go into this header down the bottom left-hand side of the motherboard. So we can bring our HD audio cable through the cutout beneath the motherboard. We'll line it up with the header and push it into place. Then we'll just pull the excess cable through to the back. Our front panel connectors are going to go into the pins on the left-hand side of this long header here. So we'll go ahead and bring the cable through from underneath, and we're going to plug it in with the front panel text facing up the way. Then we've got our USB 3.0 cable, which is going to go into this header here. So we'll bring it through the cutout, line it up with the header, and push into place. And last case cable is our front panel Type-C header, so we'll bring the cable through the cutout and get it plugged in. Our power supply is fully modular, but I've gone ahead and plugged in the cables that we're going to need. So I plugged in our 24-pin motherboard cable. I plugged in our 12-volt 2x6 cable to power our graphics card. I've plugged in two 8-pin EPS cables to add additional power to our CPU. Our motherboard will accommodate both an 8-pin and a 4-pin connector, but we can split one of the 8-pin connectors into two. I've also plugged in a PCIe cable because our Lian UniFan hub is going to need PCIe power. So next we can set our power supply bracket into place, and then we're going to secure it using 4 of the large power supply screws. We're now ready to install our power supply in the case. We've got these little notches at the bottom. So the first thing we're going to do is line them up with the notches at the bottom of the bracket, and then we can tilt our power supply up and into place. And importantly, we've got our power supply's intake fan facing out the way. And then we can secure the bracket into place at the back using the original 2 screws. We've got an 8-pin and a 4-pin EPS power connector to provide additional power to our CPU. So I'm going to go ahead and bring our connectors through, and we'll get them plugged into the motherboard. Our 24-pin cable is going to go into this header here, so we'll bring it through the cutout in the motherboard, line it up, and push into place. And then we'll just pull the excess cable through to the back. We do have this little bracket at the back to help position our 24-pin cable. It's more if you've got a braided cable and you want to keep it straight, rather this cable is actually going to stay pretty straight where it is. But I'll show you how to use it, so I'm just going to simply slide it up to where I'm happy it's supporting the 24-pin cable and keeping it in a good position. And then to keep it in that position at the back, all we need to do is tighten up the thumb screw. On the side of the case, I've got 2 Lian reverse blade LCD screen unifans. So all we need to do is join the 2 fans together. So it's just a matter of linking them up and pushing down to lock them into place. And then on the side, we can install our fan cable and we'll push it into place. So the first thing I want to do before installing any fans in the case is to install our Lian UniFan hub, because once the fans go at the bottom, it's going to be harder to get plugged into the bottom of the motherboard. So this hub has 4 ports, 1, 2, 3 and 4, allowing us to control 4 groups of fans separately. In terms of powering the hub, we've got a PCIe cable. So we're going to plug this into a PCIe cable coming from our power supply. We've got a USB 2.0 cable, which is going to let us control the hub using Lian's L Connect. And in case we want motherboard control, we've got a 4-pin PWM and also an ARGB cable. So I'm just going to bring the hub through to the back and we'll pass the cables through to the front and get them plugged in. Okay, so we've got 2 USB 2.0 headers at the bottom of the motherboard. So we'll bring the USB cable through and we'll get it plugged into the motherboard. We've got 3 system fan headers here, so we'll bring the PWM cable through and get it plugged into one of the headers. And we've got 2 ARGB headers here, so we'll bring the ARGB cable through and get it plugged into one of the headers. So that just leaves us the PCIe cable to power the hub. So we've got an 8-pin PCIe cable, but it does split into a 6-pin and a 2, and it's just the 6-pin that we need for this hub. So we can go ahead and split the cable up. We just need to pull the 2-pin forward, and it's going to separate the 6-pin. We've got the little notch here, and line it up and push into place. So just before we install our Lian Uni fans at the side, I'm just going to pass the fan cable all the way through to the back. We can then set the fans up into place at the side. We'll get them screwed into place using the screws that come with the fans. I'm going to be installing 3 reverse blade non-LCD fans at the bottom of the case. Again, these are going to be set to intake, bringing plenty of cooler into our build. So we can go ahead and set the fans onto the fan bracket. And you'll notice I've centered our fans towards the front of this bracket because our vertical GPU bracket extends in at the back. And we'll secure it to the bracket using the screws that came with the fans. Next, we've got our vertical GPU support bracket to install, so we're going to need to remove the rubber pads from these 4 screw holes. We can then set our vertical GPU support bracket into place, and we'll secure it to the fans using 4 of the included fan screws. Just before we set our fans into place, I'm going to pass the fan cables through to the back, and then we can set our bracket into place. And we'll secure the bracket into place at the bottom with the 2 original screws. I'm not going to install my rear fan just yet because it will interfere with screwing down our vertical GPU. But what I am going to do at this stage is just pass a fan cable through to the back. The last thing to do is get all our fans plugged into the hub. So I'm going to plug our bottom fans into port number 1, rear fans into port number 2, and our side fans into port number 3. And that's everything connected up. So we need to join our 3 fans together and they're going to connect magnetically. All we need to do is bring the fans into contact and they'll clip into place. Then we need to connect our fan cable. It's also going to connect magnetically. So just bring it into contact and it's simply going to clip into place. So in terms of the cables coming from the fans, we've got a 4-pin PWM cable, which is going to go into our CPU fan header, and a 3-pin 5V ARGB cable, which we're going to plug into the ARGB header on the motherboard. We can then set our fans onto the radiator and we'll secure the fans into place using the included long radiator screws. We can then set our top fan stroke radiator bracket into place, and then we'll secure it into place using the included short radiator screws. If we go on to take a look at our pump, we've got a screen on it and it simply pulls off. And coming from the pump, we've got 2 cables. We've got a 4-pin PWM cable, which we're going to plug into the pump header on the motherboard. And we've got this USB extension cable. So in the box, we get the other end of the cable, which simply plugs into here. And then we're going to plug the other end into USB 2.0 header on our motherboard. I'm going to be installing this on an AMD motherboard. So I'm going to take our AMD bracket, line it up, and then we'll simply push it into place. Then what we're going to want to do is take one of these brackets, put one in at this side and tighten a thumb screw loosely, and then we'll turn it around and do exactly the same thing on the other side. So just before we set our radiator down to place, I'm just going to get the cables passed through to the back coming from our fans. And this grey header at the top is our CPU fan header. So we'll just bring the PWM cable back through and we'll get it plugged into place. We've got an ARGB header just here, so we'll bring the ARGB cable through and get it plugged in. And then at this stage we can line the bracket up at the top. And then we'll secure things into place using the 5 original screws. And at this stage we can then replace our top panel. Next I'm going to add some thermal paste to the centre of the CPU. It is included with the IO. And we need to remember to remove the plastic protection from our cold plate. The other thing that I'm going to do is wrap our cables up and round the cold plate, being held in place by this top bracket, which is going to help organise them towards the top of the case. Then I'm just going to want to get the top bracket over the clip on the motherboard, and then we'll get the bottom bracket into place. So now that's both clips in place, all we need to do is tighten up both the thumb screws in turn. Not the easiest to show you with the radiator in place, but our CPU opt header is just below our CPU fan header here at the top. So I'm going to go ahead and get the PWM cable plugged into here. And then I'm just going to pull all the excess fan cable through to the back. I'm also going to pass the USB cable through to the back, and I'll plug the USB cable into the bottom of the motherboard. And then we can go ahead and attach our screen to the AIO. And we'll remove the plastic protection. Okay, first step in installing our graphics card is to install our riser cable. So we'll just line it up with the graphics card and push into place. And just before I get the GPU in place, I'm going to make sure to pull through our power cable for it. And I'm just going to go ahead and get the power cable plugged into the graphics card now. Next, I'm just going to open the PCIe clip in the motherboard by pressing this button here on the motherboard. And then we'll just route the riser cable under our AIO tubes and we'll get it plugged into the motherboard. Next, I'm just going to lift our graphics card up and into place, push our AIO tubes back and push our riser cable down, and then we'll get the graphics card plugged into the bracket. And then we're just going to screw the graphics card using 3 screws taken from the horizontal brackets. And then I'm just going to have to position the GPU support bracket, so I'm just going to lift it up slightly to get it into where it's supporting our graphics card. So I think they're all the way towards the front. And then I'm just going to turn the thumb screw clockwise till I'm happy the graphics card is straight. And then I'm just going to pull the excessive power cable through to the back. Last thing to do is slide our rear fan into place. And then I can bring the cable that we have pre-routed through and we'll get it connected up. We then just lift the fan up into place and we'll get it screwed in from the back. Okay, last thing to do is some cable management and get the panels back on again. Okay, so that's the build complete and looking absolutely amazing. As you can see, I've set things up off camera. If you don't know how to do that, including installing Windows, drivers, RGB software, I've made another video that covers all of that, and you'll find a link to that video in the description. There's a few extra things that video won't cover, including setting up these Lian Unifans and the software installed for this AIO, but you'll also find separate videos linked in the description which cover how to do this. In terms of our temperatures, our Ryzen 7 9700X idled at 46 degrees and reached a maximum of 64 degrees during the 10-minute IDA 64 stability test. The Aorus Master 5070 Ti idled at 32 degrees and reached a maximum of 66 degrees under load. So I'm not planning on making a separate review of this case. Unfortunately, I missed the launch. I was enjoying a nice holiday over in Sicily. So you'll have already seen everybody else's review of the case. So there's not much point in me making a separate one at this stage. But what I will do is share my thoughts on the case. So this case is available in both black and white. It's got an MSRP of $89.99 US, or for an extra $10 you can get a version which comes with 5 pre-installed case fans, which is probably the version that I would recommend. Now at that price, with this build quality and the features that Lian are offering in this case, it's an absolute no-brainer. This case is absolutely brilliant. Things I really like about this case, in particular, I like the GPU support bracket, both horizontal and vertical. The vertical one is absolutely brilliant because that is something that most people are not doing. And I've been really put off installing these massive graphics cards vertically because it's almost impossible to install them without sag. And Lian have solved the problem with a really simple and easy to use bracket. The big rubber grommet between the two compartments at the bottom, absolutely brilliant. No issues at all passing the 12 volt 2x6 cable through. Although I didn't really take full advantage of that 24-pin cable support because I hadn't used a fancy braided cable, it is a really simple and smart idea, and it just really adds to all the other really cool cable management features that Lian have added to this case. So although I haven't made a review, the conclusion would be the same. This case is absolutely brilliant, and if you're in the market for a slightly small compact ATX case, Lian have got you covered with this. This case is so much better in every way than the original. So hopefully you have enjoyed this full step-by-step PC build guide. If you have, please remember to give the video a thumbs up. And if you're not currently subscribed to the channel, please hit the subscribe button as well. Thanks for watching.